Teresa, so I'm gonna try and do this intellectual struggle assignment through a video just because it's a lot easier for me than having to write it out. I'm gonna try and not make this video too long, so let me get started. So for like number one, I've had a lot of struggles in my life, bar none. I've, had so many surgeries and had so many intensive therapy sessions to where it, can mess with your mind of like, can I really do this? Can I really handle this much intense struggle of not being able to do something for days upon days and then finally be able to do it? So I've definitely had that happen to me, but it showed me that I can do anything regardless of what anybody says. And I think in terms of like math struggles and math experiences, I honestly think this class has been the hardest for me just because I've been in school since kindergarten, and you've been taught a certain way of here's a formula and now plug in numbers and you'll get your right answer. So having this experience of here's a coaching, some information, but I'm not going to give you a formula to do it with, and you have to figure that out for yourself and teach yourself how to do that, that's different for me. It's like turning my brain upside down and just making it to where it's like, okay, what do I do now? So I think it's definitely beneficial for me because it gets me to think differently of how I have been thinking for myself, because I always just went along with what other people told me to do. But now that I have to think for myself, it's like, oh, well, okay, gotta actually use my brain now. So I think that definitely will help me. I know that I've been struggling quite a bit with this class, but I think it will help me in the long run, I hope, because I think it can teach me a lot of other life lessons that I didn't think I'd learn, so yeah. And then the difference between students going to the board in America versus Japan, it's no true statement that we as Americans, as we've gone into school, struggle. The one thing that I think is very unique to Japan versus America when it comes to this type of subject, at least according to the recording, is that we don't really give the students that are struggling a chance to explain why they are struggling, but we don't give them the experience of, oh, they've done it, they've done what we've asked them to do, but they've figured it out on their own and been able to handle it by themselves. And the difference with Japan is they take the weakest link, which I think is very surprising, and they make them work through it until they have the right answer. But then that, the end result of that, all that is the fact that they realize that they've done it. They've been coached through it, but they've done it on their own and been able to figure it out on their own. Whereas versus in America, we basically spoon feed our kids, I think. We don't just coach them through it. We give them the answer and say, oh, you're good, it's okay. We coddle them a bit more. Even as college students, we've, as we grew up through college or through elementary school, middle school, and high school, it still was the same. We were still kind of coddled and not really shown how to figure it out for ourselves. So I think that's definitely something that could be changed. I think the one thing is, though, is that we'd have to have the right educators to inform us of this as, we continue into different centuries and different generations. Because I think as Americans, that would help us to think more for ourselves rather than, what other people tell us to do. I think that's one of the things that America struggles with, is that we listen to everybody else but ourselves. So, yeah. And so the third question, I think with parents and teachers, what they do is they let their kids know what they've been doing. Because, like, with the Japan teacher and the Japanese kid in the math class, he coached him through it. He didn't give him the right answer. He just coached him through it, and he eventually the kid was able to understand what his mistakes were and be able to fix them by himself. And he kind of let his students be the teacher, of saying, did he get this right? Did he get this right? And he stayed persistent in asking his students that until the student that was up at the board got the right answer. And then the kid was able to have that experience of kind of, I wouldn't call it euphoria, but of successfulness. He was able to experience that joy and that triumph of, I did it, I did it on my own without any help. So I think that's definitely different. As when it comes to the mothers, I think we teach our kids what it's like to be smart. We give them an example of what it is to be a smart person. Like with the American Mother, she pointed out that reading and talking about books is what smart people do, and I don't think that's very intellectually, I would say it's not very encouraging. It's encouraging, but it's encouraging in the wrong way. I think if he showed more persistence of really, really, really trying, and she pointed that out like the Asian mother did, I think that would make a bit of a bigger impact on the kid, because then it shows him that he can do the stuff on his own, be able to think for himself instead of what the teachers want him to think about, and come up with new ways to do things, or new ideas from a book that he's been talking about. Whereas with the Asian mother, when she was talking to her son about him playing piano, she pointed out that he practiced and practiced and practiced. And he said he wanted to do it on his own. He said he didn't want any coaching from his parents. And she pointed that out as a good sign for him to do. And he eventually, because he had parents that were supporting him and encouraging him to do what he was already doing, he was able to persevere and win his first piano competition. So I think that is definitely different. I would be thinking how the American mother would be thinking. I wish my mother would have been that way before too. I've never really had that happen to me, except for when I was in middle school. I had a teacher that I worked under that was very persistent, and he wanted me to do well, but he wanted me to figure it out on my own. He didn't just give me the answers. He coached me through it, and I am very grateful for the way he taught me, because that helped me to realize that I can do anything on my own. It may take me some time, but I can do it. And, another example of, I guess you would call it bad teaching per se, my aunt is a kindergarten teacher. And I, over the summer, went into her classroom to just help her out because I didn't have anything really else better to do yet. And the one thing I noticed, and that I honestly was not very impressed with, was my aunt was constantly yelling at her weaker links. She wasn't building them up. She wasn't encouraging them. She wasn't, she wasn't coaching them through what they needed to learn. All I heard constantly was yelling, and I would cringe because I was like, why is she yelling at them? They're only 5, 6, 7 years old. They don't need to be yelled at. They probably already get that enough at home. And that's the thing that I think as a future teacher I'm going to try and avoid, is I really think that if you're going to encourage your students, you need to encourage them in a positive way, not a negative way, because you don't know what their home life is like when they leave the school. You don't know whether they get constantly yelled at or something, or, get beaten up or whatever. So the fact that if you can be that positive, encouraging light in their life, that will help them go eons beyond their natural talents, I think. So I think that definitely changes for me on how I will think in the future when I have my own kids or when I become a teacher. So yeah. And then I think I've kind of already explained question 4 more than I should have. I think it is very good for students to I wouldn't say struggle, I'd say be challenged a little bit more, because that lets them know that they can do it. They can, be able to figure something out without somebody else's help. They can be independent in their own way. I think the benefits of it is it makes them stronger and helps them be able to get through future challenges as they grow up. I think in cases of how long do you think they should struggle, I think if you constantly, the one thing I think, and that I think not only you're very good at, but that like my father's very good at, is you coach your students towards the answer. You don't just spoon feed them the answer. You give them clues and give them insight to what they're doing right and wrong, but you don't automatically say it. And I think that's very good for a student. And I think it just depends. Every student thinks differently and, processes differently like I do. So I think, just being able to give them that extra time to try and figure it out using different techniques and all that other stuff will help the student not to struggle as much. I'm not saying make them struggle the whole entire time. I'm just saying give them the right tools to get the answer that they're looking for. So, I don't know if that really answers that question, but I'd say, if they are persistent enough, they won't struggle for very long. If they're persistent and driven, then they'll be fine. Sorry, I'm just reading this last question.